Hi everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the discussion about how RSS is gaining influence in the US. Sorry for the delay, we were experiencing some technical issues. So today, joining with us is Raqib Hameed Naik, a Kashmiri journalist based in US. His works focus on conflicts, human rights issues, refugee and climate issues. His works have been published in TRT World, Climate Tracker, Al Jazeera, Caravan, and various other publications. So, an investigative report by Naik on some Hindu extremist organizations in the US receiving more than $8 lakh from the COVID relief fund of US was published in Al Jazeera a few days back. It was taken down due to some pressure from the right-wing groups probably, but then it was again republished after an uproar from the citizens in the US. So these organizations have now filed a lawsuit against Naik and various others, demanding a compensation for publishing the piece. So we know there have been the presence of such international organizations acting as a support mechanism, if I'm not wrong, for the RSS. But this is the first time that such organizations are exposed legally. They're involved in a legal battle. So on behalf of Fraternity Movement of India, I welcome Raqib Naik to tell us more about these organizations and the case he's fighting. Welcome, Raqib.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So first of all, this is a lawsuit that was filed by Hindu American Foundation. That is one of the Hindu nationalist group that was mentioned in my Al Jazeera piece. And the lawsuit was filed on before 2 days ago on Friday in a federal court in Washington, D.C. And they are asking, I just had a look in the lawsuit on the lawsuit, and they're asking for 75 million in damages. And they have named 5 different individuals as defendants. That includes Sunita Vishwanathan. She's a prominent activist, human rights activist in the US, and she runs Hindus for Human Rights. Along with her is Raja Rajagopalan. He's also the co-founder of Hindus for Human Rights. And there is John Prabhudas. He runs a Indian diaspora Christian organization in the US, and Indian American Muslim Council. Rashid Ahmed from Indian American Muslim Council, the largest Muslim diaspora org in the US, and Dr. Audrey Trushke, the well-known Rutgers professor who studies South Asian history. And she has been on the target of right-wing for a quite long time. So these are the 5 individuals that have been directly named as defendants. And they have been named defendants because they gave the statements. Like, for example, Sunita Vishwanathan was quoted in my piece, and she gave a statement about these right-wing words. And she has been named in the lawsuit just because she expressed her opinion in my piece. Then there are other 3 that includes Raju Rajagopalan, John Prabhudas, and Rashid Ahmed. They have been sued just because they issued a press release calling for, because they are also, these organizations are also the part of Coalition Against Genocide in India, and they issued a press release calling for a federal investigation in finances of all these organizations. So that's the reason why they have filed this lawsuit against these 3 individuals from 3 different organizations. And then there is Dr. Audrey Trushke. She is being sued just because she shared my piece on Twitter. So, and then I haven't been named as one of the defendants, but I have been named as a non-party co-conspirator. And I believe later on, this is just a trick not to make it as a, because if they would have named me as a defendant, directly as a defendant, this could have become assault on freedom of speech, freedom of press. So they just try to play this trick by not directly including me and naming me as a defendant. But I know in future they're going to name me as a defendant, as they're going to make me as a main party, because the overall purpose of this lawsuit is to silence me, is to silence my work on work that I'm doing here in the US. This is what they plan to do. So currently this suit is in the DC court, and all other parties that have been named as a defendants. They're going to fight. I don't know what they're doing, but of course there must be something because it's a legal issue now. But I'm a non-party right now, and let's see how it goes. I'll get to know in coming weekdays and weeks and months, of course.
Okay, more power to you. So can you give us an idea about these organizations? What do they do? How do they work in the US?
So going back to my article, this was published on April 2nd last month, and I had mentioned, the article mentioned 5 organizations, Hindu nationalist groups that received COVID funds. Last year, after the coronavirus wreaked havoc in the United States, the US government, under the CARES Act, CARES is COVID Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, launched a lot of programs, different programs, and that included one for small businesses and organizations that were affected by the COVID, and those who couldn't pay their employees and couldn't, like, had enough money to pay rent and all the stuff. So these organizations also applied for the funds, and they got nearly $833,000. So it's nearly $1 million they received in the aid. And those organizations, among those organizations, included VHPA, Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America, and then Seva International, Ekal Vidyalaya Foundation, Infinity Foundation, and Hindu American Foundation. So these were the 5 organizations named in my piece. Coming back to your question, like what kind of organizations are these? So, like, starting from VHPA. VHPA is Vishwa, of course. We have Vishwa Hindu Parishad in India, and in America we have Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America. Though legally they are separate organizations, right? Legally they are not linked. But if you go to the VHPA website, you will find that they say that they are very much aligned and driven by the values as followed by VHP India. So what does that say? Name is the same, the intentions are the same. Of course, they're very much the same, right? So that's number one thing. And VHPA recently, I mean, I don't have to just go a lot of in the history. Just recently, a few weeks ago, they invited Yati Narsinganand Saraswati, the guy who called for killing Muslims, for genocide in Muslims. They invited him as a speaker. And after the public uproar, the invitation was rescinded. So this is the VHPA of America. So it's one of the organizations. And then there is Seva International, and Seva International, its sister organization in India is Seva Bharati, which is the service wing of RSS. And then there is Ekal Vidyalaya Foundation in US. Ekal Vidyalaya is claimed as a non-profit, as a project by VHPA. In India, it is claimed by VHP India. And Ekal Vidyalaya Foundation runs these single school schools, single teacher schools across India. And right now, I think they are running nearly 100,000 schools across India. That is 1 lakh schools across India, especially in the rural and the tribal areas of the country. And if you look at the 2009 report by a Ministry of Human Resource Development, it explicitly said that these schools promote hate. Their curriculum is communal. The things they teach there are anti-minorities. It's HRD. I'm not saying it. Whatever I'm saying is factual. It's backed by proper facts and evidences. It's not something I'm making in my mind and saying it up. I'm just saying what is already out there. I'm just joining the dots and putting it in front of the people. So this is Ekal Vidyalaya Foundation, and Infinity Foundation is run by Rajiv Malhotra. And everyone very well knows who Rajiv Malhotra is if they're into academics, of course. So Infinity Foundation, and then there is Hindu American Foundation. It's an advocacy group based in DC, and they don't send money to India in terms of, like, funding affiliate. They are more likely mostly advocacy group working here in the DC, but their policies, the kind of stuff they promote, that aligns with Hindu nationalism, that aligns with what I mean, they support the policies of the BJP government. So I mean, that's pretty much it. But these are the 5 organizations that were mentioned in the article. But on top of that, we need to understand, like our topic of the discussion is how is RSS gaining influence in the US. So on the other part, we need to understand there is a US based RSS as well, same replica of RSS in India. In US, it is named as HSS, Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh. So it's not like RSS is gaining influence after Modi came to power in India. No, it is gaining influence in the US since a very long time. Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America was established in 1917 US. HSS was established around 1989. So it's not a new phenomenon. And what happened, before the Babri Masjid demolition, there were special shilas, like special bricks sent by Hindutva groups here in the US to India. Like VHPA was one of the organizations that sent these special bricks for construction of Ram temple at the disputed land site in Ayodhya. So this has been going since long. And like in India, they have been there since 1925. And right now, whatever they are doing is just the work of last more than 100 years. And in the US as well, they have been functional since last 50 years at least. So whatever you see right now, this uptick in the movement, you see their influence in the US, it's not just a result of a couple of 5 to 7 years. It's a result of last 50 years of work.
So moving on, how do these organizations present themselves to the people of US, to the government? How do they gain legitimacy? Like if you look at India, we know that RSS is pretty much flaunting their Hindu extremist ideology, and they still have legitimacy in India. So is it the same, or do they have a veil when they present themselves?
American Hindutva and Indian Hindutva, ideologically, they're the same. But there is a thing called articulation. Okay. Yeah. So the ideological, their values, they perfectly align with each other. But how they articulate that ideology to the people, that differs. So for example, Indian Hindutva, the Hindutva groups in India, the people who endorse this ideology, when they present themselves in India, it is going to be different than how they present in the US, because they adopt according to the local conditions, according to the values of the host country. So in US, for example, they will present their arguments within the framework of, they will present their arguments in such a way, they will present themselves such a way that aligns with the American values. For example, American values of freedom, equality, justice, humanitarianism, and morality. But at the same time, when it comes to policies in India, they will do the opposite. For example, they will talk about equality in the United States. They will talk about anti-Black racism. But when it comes to ensuring the same equality for Dalits in India, they will not say a word. They will instead whitewash the caste. They will erase the caste. They will say it's a colonial construct. It's not linked to religion anyway, in any case. And if you talk about justice, in US, they'll be very vocal. No, everyone should be, justice should be the core of everything. But when it comes to India, they will side with the regime. They will side with the government. When it comes to ensuring justice for the minorities, when we talk about ensuring justice for the marginalized communities, they will back up. Why is it that? It's just because in US, things affect them. For example, if they don't talk about racism, they're also people of color, and ultimately it is going to affect them. But what is happening in India, it's not affecting them in any way. It's just because they think Modi is some big savior out there. It's a promised Hindu land. It's going to be a Hindu nation, our holy land, and all, driven by all this rhetoric. So in US, they have presented themselves like, they work within the framework of multiculturalism. And if anyone is interested in knowing how they operate, they should, I would recommend them to read a paper by John Wicker, He was a student at University of Washington. He wrote a very excellent paper, and he said the American Hindutva in the US, what they do is these groups, these individuals, they indulge in politics of recognition, you know, and they work themselves upwards just to present, as if they are like, they adhere to American values. They try to fit themselves so well within the system that it would be hard for you to distinguish whether they adhere to some sort of right-wing ideology or not. And ultimately, their objective is to influence US foreign policy toward India.
Okay.
So in US, you would find Hindutva people who endorse this ideology, both in Democrats as well as Republicans. You can sometimes find them among progressives as well,
Okay.
but it's just a way how they have been able to make these inroads, supporting justice in one country and at the same time supporting injustice in another country, supporting equality in one country and supporting inequality in the other country, because at the end of the day, things don't affect them.
Yes, sheer hypocrisy.
Yes.
So, how does a common people of US look at these organizations? And of course, there have been certain allegations against such organizations and people backed by such organizations, not in a big way, but still. So, how does a government look at these organizations? Also, how does the common people look at it?
See, for example, it's just you and me who know what Hindutva is, A lot of people in the US, they don't know what Hindutva is. They know, like, after this international coverage of the Modi government and all, they know something is bad in India, but they don't know the reason. Most of the people, they don't know what is the reason. Why are the things bad? Some people think it as a Modi problem or the BJP problem. But I, as a journalist, you as an activist, or other persons who know what BJP is. BJP is the political wing of RSS. So it's not just the party problem. It's not just one person. It's the ideology. And a lot of people in the United States, they don't know about the ideology of RSS and what this Hindutva ideology is. So for them, for example, there is a CA International. Right now, it is raising COVID funds, relief funds for India. And I hope it will go towards COVID fund. COVID relief fund, buying oxygen concentrators and all. So, but Seva International is a sister organization of Seva Bharati in the US. And I saw a lot of congressmen, like Muslim congressmen who are members of the state congresses in the United States, they sharing their requests. Some companies, like big companies, Microsoft, there's Boston Consulting Group, them donating to the Seva International because they don't know what's their history. But if you go down and look at their links, and there was this report from South Asian Citizens Web between 2001 and 2012, 5 organizations linked with RS, 5 organizations from the US donated $55 million to RSS affiliated nonprofits in India. And if you go a little bit back, and there is a 2002 report from Sabrang, India, and it said there is this group called IDRF, Indian Development and Relief Fund. It's a nonprofit in the US. They donate 50% of their donations went to RSS affiliates between 1994 and 2000. So money has been flowing down to India, and this money here is not raised just from one community. Everyone donates. Muslim, like for example, Ekal Vidyalaya sends money to India, right? And they raise millions and millions of dollars. Seva too. But the way they present a lot of Muslims, everyone donates to them. But here they present themselves within the values, within the framework of the American value system. And they present as if they are doing some great work there. And Ekal Vidyalaya, for example, they would say, hey, you know what? We are running this one single teacher school in a rural part of the country in India where kids are poor, they don't have a school to go and everything. And a person like me who knows nothing about them, I'll be like, okay, they're doing something great. And how much is the cost? Monthly is $200. For someone American who is like a middle class, $200 is nothing. And he will say, okay, Go and establish this school in the memory of my mother. $200 per month, yearly is $2,400, right? Not a lot of pinch on someone's pocket, but this is how they do it. And it's just one person. Imagine there are thousands and thousands of persons making such donations. And I'm just telling you in terms of, like, in the organization, how these organizations operate, because that's what what my story was about. And broader in terms of these individuals, they present themselves, like, as I said before, they very much adapt to the values of this host country, that is US in this case. And that's why it's very difficult to, catch on to their real thing, their real deal, what they actually plan to do. So it's all about education and awareness that is needed here in the US, to educate everyone, to the people, to the congressmen, about what their real intention is, what they really do.
Okay,
and the ideology they support.
Yeah. Does that mean the government is also unaware of these organizations, what they actually do?
Government, see, for example, SBA funds went to these groups. If government would have known, these funds wouldn't have gone to these non-profits, right? So at the government level too, right? And there is not too much documentation about the modus operandi. Of course, they fund these groups in India, but what happens on the ground with those funds? That is a question that everyone should ask. And I am planning to work on this in detail, that the funds that are raised in India, what is the effect of these funds on people, on the minorities, on the ground in India?
Okay, so all these organizations work among the Hindu community in the US. So are there any other alternative progressive voices in the Hindu community other than these Hindutva forces? And what do they, how do they work, and what is these organizations' reaction to such voices?
In US, there are more than 2 million Hindus, and as I say, I always say, Hinduism is different than Hindutva.
Yeah.
There are a lot of good, great Hindus in the community who know what is going, and who are, standing up behind minorities like a rock. Even they are more vocal than the people who are directly being affected by what's happening in India. And in the US, we have Hindus for Human Rights, which is a progressive voice fighting for the human rights of minorities in India. And interestingly, in this lawsuit, you would find Sunita Vishwanathan, and she's the one who runs Hindus for Human Rights. And she's being sued just because she's a progressive voice, just because she speaks truth. She speaks truth to the power, just because she stands behind the minorities, just because she busts the myth and the propaganda spread by the Hindutva forces here in the US. And a progressive Hindu voice is a bigger threat to the narrative of Hindutva than the Muslims and Christians saying the same thing. Because when a Hindu says, when someone from Hindu community says, okay, guys, the thing that you're doing, hey, Hindutva folks, the thing you are doing is wrong, then that is something that is very hard for them to counter. And especially in a country like US, where a third person sees 2 Hindus arguing about something, and someone who is progressive, who talks about rights, who talks about freedom, equality, and justice and morality. At the same time, the other person who gives it a spin and talks about the opposite thing when it comes to India and to the US, then of course it's very easy to recognize their hypocrisy. So the progressive Hindu voices are a challenge for the Hindutva forces in the US, and that's why they're after them.
Yeah. Also, there has been reports that the RSS is trying to get people into the government, like by providing financial and other supports. So how does that work, and why do you think they are trying to get people into the government?
So, I mean, as I told you earlier, this is one of the main goals of American Hindutva, to get people in the position of power, because ultimately their objective is to influence foreign policy towards this regime in India. And they have been working on this for a very long time. To have this favorable policy, foreign policy, they need people in the politics. They need people in on the top echelons of power. They need people in the position of power. And for that to happen, they need people running for the office. And last year during 2020 elections, I mean, I'll not go beyond, I mean, before that, I'll just talk about 2020 elections. There was a guy running from Texas. His name was Sri Princeton Kulkarni. He was running from Texas District 22. And he was running on a Democrat ticket, pretty much Democrat, liberal person, studied in a very excellent school in the US, very well articulated person, pretended he was a, like, you know, within the same American value system, talks about justice, equality, and everything. But when activists in the US digged into his financial details, they found that this guy was funded by the American Sangh, by the people associated and associated with, like, for example, HSS, Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh, and other powerful Hindutva lobbyists in the US. So he was being funded by them. Like, you know, they were funding towards his campaign. So it's not just a one case. There is Tulsi Gabbard. She was also, like, you know, she was given a lot of money by the Hindutva supporters in the US. And it's just two of the cases. There are other cases too. I won't go into details there. In Chicago, Congressman, he's also like a little bit, I mean, I would not just go more into the details of other individuals, but yes, they've been doing a lot of groundwork, and they have people in politics. And apart from having people run for the Congress, there are some powerful people who are linked to the top leadership of Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Like in Republican Party, there is this guy called Shalabh Shali Kumar. And this is the guy who is considered very close to Donald Trump. In 2016, when he was running for the office for the first time, Shalabh Kumar donated $1.5 million to the Trump. And it was just open donation. I don't know how much other donations he got from him through he formed a Republican Hindu coalition. And through it, he gave a lot of money to Trump. And he, in 2016, in Addison, New Jersey, he organized a program where he invited Donald Trump. Donald Trump was a speaker there. And there, this guy, Shali Kumar, called for keeping, I mean, you know, monitoring the mosques in the US. Shali Kumar, Hindutva guy, he calls for monitoring the mosque in the US. And this is the very same guy who 1 year before the Indian elections in 2014, in 2013, he got 3 congressmen from the US to visit Modi in Gujarat when he was the CM and running for to be the Prime Minister of India. And back in time, he got 3 congressmen from the US to India, and there they met Modi. And that was the beginning of developing a cordial relationship between Modi and the US congressman, because before 2014, Modi was banned from entering the US. His visa he was on the ban list due to his complicity and role in the 2002 riots. So you see, like, you know, how powerful these people are. And it's just one of the things. And I mean, in 2019, these Hindutva groups also formed this American for Hindus, PAC, Political Action Committee, that solicits funds and contributions for the candidates who are running for the office. And this American for Hindus put a thing very straight up, that we won't support any candidate who is anti-India or anti-Hindu. And they endorse both Democratic and Republican candidates, and nearly give nearly $250,000 in contributions. But this anti-India and anti-Hindu thing, this is also the narrative that is, like, you know, pretty much in the US these days, and has been going on since 2014 when Modi came to power. So they tag any person. So this anti-Hindu and anti-India thing, this is how this works. This is how this Hindutva groups in the US project. Anyone who speaks against Modi is anti-India. Anyone who speaks against Hindutva is anti-Hindu. So what they are trying, they're just trying to blur these lines so that, like, you know, they're just trying to mix their ideology with the religion, just trying to take the cover, right? Just to protect their man and just to protect their ideology.
Okay. So post the Modi government came into power in India. So in India, this Hindu extremist ideology, it has always been there. But then after the Modi government came into power, there is a very evident shift in this, in the hate crimes, in the whole, legitimacy of these, of all of the normalizing of these, the ideology. So in US, when events like Howdy Modi is conducted, and there are people from both Democrats and Republicans attending it, and there is this whole thing of Modi fandom. So do you think this shift has happened after the Modi government came into power, or has it always been there, this pro-BJP sentiments?
When it comes to, especially to Howdy Modi, like there 50,000 people came to attend this event, and they're very much like, see, as I said, Hindutva in US has been working since last more than 50 years, and the ground was already there. And after 2002 happened, there were voices prominent within the community, within the Hindutva groups in the US, who wanted to project Prime Minister Modi as the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi as a Prime Ministerial candidate. So the voices to make the Prime Ministerial candidate because of his 2002 record,
Yeah.
So these groups within the US, they wanted to project him as a prime minister. And for them, as I say, this is not about BJP. This is about Hindutva. This is about RSS. This is about ideology. They see him as their man. This is the man who is going to shut down the minorities, who is going to silence all the critical and dissenting voices. He's the man who is there as a savior of Hindu religion, right? And he's the man who is going to turn India into a holy Hindu land, where Muslims and other minorities, Christians, Dalits, are reduced to that of a second-class citizens. So they see him as the man. And when he came to the US and that rally, of course, these people were gonna come there, because when they see him, they don't see him as a prime minister. He's a cult. He's the leader of the cult, and the following you see, you like certain leaders. Like, for example, I'm a fan of a lot of leaders as well, globally. But when I see them doing something wrong, I back off and I'm critical against them as well. But these people, for them, there is no, Modi can't do anything wrong. This is the belief. You cannot argue with them. You cannot put your, you cannot reason with them. You cannot put out a rational argument with them, because they are pretty much obsessed with what Modi says, what he does. So whatever he does is right. He can never do wrong. So, this is all grounded in the ideology, as I earlier said.
Okay. So how much do you think these organizations are a threat to the minority in India? And also, how do they manage to, to justify all the hate crimes and everything that is happening against the minorities in India? Precisely, how did they justify the CA and RC, the movement that was against CA and RC?
Yeah. So, as I said, articulation. So, in the US, when Article 370 was abrogated, I'll start with Article 370. Okay. They said, oh, it's a great move. Now, Jammu and Kashmir is going to, see wonders. There was terrorism. There was no development. There was such a corruption. Now terrorism will come down to zero, and Kashmir will see prosperity. And when the lockdown was implemented, the Hindutva organization with the US, they just like, came to the forefront and said, oh, nothing is wrong in there. These are all lies and myths being spread by these separatist groups, those people who want to divide India, who are anti-India. And when CA-NRC thing happened, again, articulation, how they were trying to articulate and present the fact. So what they do is they, like, for example, when you take CA, when you take NRC and PR together, it's a lethal combination, and it is going to disenfranchise Muslims. It's going to, like, put a lot of them in detention centers. But what they did here was, hey, no, these people are lying. CA, it's a great law. It is going to be a savior for Hindus from Hindus who are being persecuted in the region, in the other countries neighboring India. So this is a law just to protect them. And these people, these groups who are protecting in a CAA, they're lying. So what they're trying to project is they're just trying to show people that this single law, like, this is not going, but they're not showing the whole reality. Hey, there is NRC, NPR, what happened in Assam? Why were those millions of people left out of the NRC? Why are these detention centers being built? They will never touch this topic. All they will do is they will just jump onto the checklist. Okay, this is the one thing that we need to talk about. We need to repeat the lie so many times so that it starts sounding like a truth. So this is what they have been doing all these years. And when it comes to the policy decisions taken by the Modi government in India, they do the same thing. They repeat the lie so many times that it starts sounding like a truth.
Okay, so they're pretty much doing the same that they're doing in India. They're hiding information. So I think we are done here with the questions. Now, if there is any question from the viewers, you can comment it on the FB Live. We can take 2-3 questions. We still have time, 30 minutes.
Yeah, so I can see, okay.
Yeah, go on, please.
Yeah, so I can see the question, how did those organizations reacted when USERF designated India as a country of particular concern for 2 consecutive years? Yeah, of course, for them. So what happened was they just outrightly, like Indian government, they rejected, there is no such thing happening. This body has no locus standi to comment on the internal affairs of India and all. These Hindutva groups, they just said that, I think I followed it, but it was like they tried very hard. They lobbied a lot. They tried to pressure a lot of groups in the US, Hindutva groups in the US. They tried to pressure US SURF not to declare India as a country of particular concern, but it failed because Yusuf commissioners at the end, they came to the conclusion that, of course, right violations are happening in India. The minorities, their religious freedom is under assault and attack. So India needs to be designated CPC. But when the CPC, the report came out, these groups were, of course, very furious, and they started saying, hey, I was looking at it, and they say, hey, they work hand in glove with Islamists and all. This is what they do. Like, if you talk about truth, if you talk about minority rights, and if you are working with Muslims, they will say, hey, you guys are Islamists. And if you work with progressive Hindus, then they will say, hey, these guys are leftists. Like, they have these, like, categorizations for different people. It's just like, to fool people, but people are not fooled. Those who want to understand, those who have room for reasoning and rationale, they know what these groups are. And every time they stand against these kind of reports, they express their rhetoric and their biased opinion against these kind of reports. They expose themselves. So yeah, so that's how I would answer this question. In the US, I mean, in the US, organizations, I don't know about how we should do that, but as a journalist, what I'm doing is I'm just writing, and I'm going to write. It doesn't matter, like, what cost I have to pay, but I'm going to write and write and write, and nothing can silence me from doing the work that I'm doing right now.
Okay.
The third question, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so there is a question, are there any organizations in the US who is countering these Hindutva organization and trying to strengthen the people's movement back in India?
Yes, there are a lot of organizations working in India. For example, there is Equality Labs, there is Ambedkar International Circle, there is Ambedkar King Study Circle, there is Hindus for Human Rights, there is Indian American Muslim Council, there is FICONA, Federation of Indian Christian Organizations in North America. So there are organizations that are working very hard to advocate for the rights of people in India, and also at the same time countering the propaganda led by the Hindu right in the US.
Okay.
There was another question: is the new US government taking any steps against these organizations, especially against RSS? So, I mean, Biden administration has come to power just 2 months ago, and I think they're right now, because he was left with a lot of mess by his predecessor Donald Trump, thanks to all the mess he had left. But I think Biden administration is very much trying to, like, at least go back to status quo, like, that was back in 2016, and there was also COVID crisis within the country, and they're trying to fix it up. So for now, I think their focus is that. But in terms of foreign policy, there were a couple of statements, like, there were a couple of statements by the secretary when he visited India, and he said that he talked about the human rights and all. So we're just going to see in next couple of months how this administration is going to take the official stand on the rights violation in India, considering Kamala Harris is the vice president. She has been, before joining the administration, she has been very vocal against what is happening in India, especially with respect to Kashmir. So we will see. We'll see. They've just been in the power for 3 months. Let's give them more time.
Okay, so there's a question. Last year, when India was demonizing Muslims as corona bombs, several countries has brought statements against the whole demonization of Muslims, but US refused to say anything. So why do you think that happened?
I think, see, I don't know who you are expecting exactly to, like, issue a statement or say things. But as far as I remember, last year was also the year when Donald Trump was in power. Okay, so I mean, Donald Trump and Modi are bros in certain ways, because they share common values. That is Islamophobia, xenophobia. In US, it's racism. In India, it's casteism. So there are a lot of values they share together. So I mean, you cannot literally expect that guy to say something about this thing, and especially when Delhi was burning, this guy was there in Gujarat waving hands at the people and shaking hands with those who were responsible for the whole mess. So for the whole thing. So I mean, you pretty much cannot expect from that administration. But still, I would say the State Department report that did mention the targeting of Muslim, especially the Tablighi Jamaat episode. The State Department, every year they release this report. They did mention that, and especially this USERF report. This is also a bipartisan federal commission, and it also, like, user report also had mention of the targeting of Muslims during the COVID.
Okay. If you see any question, you can answer. I'm actually logging in from my phone, so I can't see questions. So
Sure.
I think we can take 2 or 3 questions more.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is a question that a lot of us here in India, am I audible? Okay.
Yes, you are.
So a lot of us here in India think that RSS should be banned. So is there some kind of that sentiments amongst the US citizens who know about the RSS? And are there some senators or representatives in the Congress who support to put a ban on the RSS?
So first of all, I mean, there are congressmen who are very vocal against this ideology. For example, even from the own Hindu community as well. There is Rokhanna, he's a congressman. He's very vocal against the government, and not the government, actually the stuff they do. And we have Pramila Japal, very vocal. We have Ilhan Umar, Rashida Tlaib, and other congressmen as well, congresspersons as well. So they know, like, what's going on in India and all. But this RSS ban, this is a big thing. I mean, and that has to come from within the country first, like, and especially it gets tricky when you have an ideology and a group whose political wing is in power. It's very difficult for officials to talk about a ban, straight up ban, like, because literally banning RSS would be like, would amount to like, taking on the BJP government too and on its legitimacy. I mean, that's a different area that is not my specialization. But yeah, this is how I would answer this.
Okay. So there is another question. I think we can end with this. How do you perceive the executive of the present government, where there are considerable members are of Indian origin? So do you consider this as the success of the right-wing lobby to alter the foreign policy, as you have said earlier?
Yeah. So let me tell you one thing. All the people from the Indian American community, and yeah, there are a lot of people who are in the current administration. But let me tell you, they are not all not right wing. There are a few people who adhere or like, are supported or who have a little bit background or links with these orgs. But trust me, this is United States. Even Trump couldn't stay in power as a president more than 4 years. So this ideology has no place in the United States. As a country that strongly believes in its values, these things are not going to work here. Of course, but few people have made the inroads, but there are a lot more people from the community, from the Indian American community, who stand up against this ideology. And it would be very difficult for them to, like, especially under this administration, to do anything that that doesn't align with the American values, for sure. And with respect to India, the foreign policy and all, as I say, India is a strong ally of US in the region, because they see it as a potential counter to China. So we just have to like wait and watch how this administration treats India when it comes to addressing the question of the common shared value, that is freedom, equality, justice. So it's just the time. We just had to wait and watch, because as I said, they have been in the power for 3 months, nearly 3 months. Let's give them more time and we'll get to know for sure. And the first step would be the implementation of the recommendations of USERF that declares India as a country of particular concern. Let's see how State Department takes that report, whether they are going to declare India as a CPC or not. This is a matter of time, but yeah, of course, the truth will come in from the people. So we just have to wait and watch.
Okay. So I think we can wind up here. So thank you so much for joining us today. Once again, sorry for the delay. And I think all this information will definitely help us in our fight against the RSS, against the Hindu supremacist ideologies here in India. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.